3 more minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was supposed to remind you.
Okay, great. All right, let me get my notes up. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate having some familiar faces and some new faces join us for this free talk, getting to the root of stress and grounding in resiliency for our trees. This talk will be given by Logan Collier.
Collier, yep. Mm-hmm.
Collier, okay.
Yeah.
Bartlett Trees.
Yeah.
Logan is a dedicated arborist with a rich family legacy in arboriculture, spanning 3 generations in the Pacific Northwest, which is pretty cool. As an arboricultural skills trainer for Bartlett Trees experts, he shares knowledge and expertise with aspiring arborists. With a degree in urban forestry and extensive experience at Collier Arbor Care and Bartlett Tree experts, Logan has excelled as a local office safety coordinator, prioritizing the well-being of his colleagues and implementing robust safety programs. He serves as a consulting arborist, specializing in tree inventories, risk assessments, very popular this year, utilizing advanced technology and management systems. His proficiency extends to his role as an arborist sales representative, focusing on pruning, pest management, and tree risk assessment. He's also skilled in plant healthcare specialist, adept at diagnosing and treating plant pests and diseases. So that's why he's here with us tonight. He holds several prestigious certifications, including an ISA board-certified master arborist, an ISA tree risk assessment qualified professional, and a certified tree care safety professional. He has unwavering dedication to arboriculture, extensive experience, and impressive range of certification, making him a wonderful asset for all of us and for this region. He's committed to safety, expertise, and tree management. Before I turn it over to you, Logan, I just want to take this opportunity to do a little commercial. Let's see if my slide changed. I can't tell. Let's see. Sorry about that. Okay. Tree Keepers, for those of you who don't know, started in 2021. We're an all-volunteer nonprofit, and our mission is to protect and advocate for trees in urban Washington County. We do that through community education, through talks like these, guided walks to foster appreciation and understanding. And you'll see on the screen some of the events coming up. We typically have ivy pools when it's appropriate for the season, but there's also some trail work taking place, and there's a couple, there's a tree walk coming up as well as a tree talk. So check out, get more information about those on our website. Our website is an amazing resource if you haven't spent some time there. And we encourage you to make that a quick link on your browser. Our advocacy work includes testimonials with various county and municipal officials and leaders. We follow developments and empower citizen groups to protect their trees. So with that, that's Tree Keepers. Happy to answer any questions about us after Logan's talk. But now I'd like to turn it over to you, Logan. I was letting folks know that you'll probably talk for maybe like 40 minutes. We'll try and capture some Q&A in the chat, but also people may hit you up live once we've wrapped up that. So I think that's it. Is there anything else, Susan, Joanne, I need to cover? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up for Susan. All over to you, Logan. Thank you.
All right. Well, let me pull up my my presentation here. All right. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Then let me get to the. There we go. All right. So we're going to be talking about, mostly about cultural disorders of trees. Thank you for that great introduction. I'm really happy to be here talking to you guys about this. And I actually ended up getting a pretty sweet view. So I'm at the Hood River Public Library. We've got the Columbia River right behind me. We'll get to see the sunset over the Columbia tonight, which is kind of nice. I have over 15 years of experience as an arborist. So I was, I'm a third generation arborist. So my grandpa started, the company that I grew up with, Collier Arbor Care, and then my dad took it over in the 80s. And about 10 years ago now, we joined with Bartlett Tree Experts. Bartlett is a large, we're actually an international company. We have offices all up the West Coast, the East Coast, into Canada and the UK. And we also have one of the largest privately held tree research laboratories. So a lot of the the data that I'll go over in this does come directly from some of our Bartlett Tree Experts PhDs. So we are mostly going to be talking about roots. Tree roots, if a tree is in a really healthy rooting area and the roots are growing well, it's going to translate to good tree health. So that's always what I focus on when I'm doing these risk assessments and what trees should be doing on landscapes. It all starts with the roots. Roots perform a couple of basic functions. So they absorb water and nutrients from the soil. They anchor trees into the soil. One of the probably the biggest function that roots do. And just like stems, roots do need oxygen to grow. So a lot of that old model of tree roots mirror the canopy. I'm going to go back to this previous slide. On average, this is very broad strokes. Tree roots are really only in the top foot of the soil, maybe 2 feet if there's a lot of oxygen space in the soil. So roots are one of the few parts of the plants that actually do respirate. So they exchange oxygen in the soil. So if we have really, really compacted soil, it's not going to be conducive to root growth. And that's the main limiting factor for how deep roots will grow, is the oxygen content of the soil. So there are reports of roots growing up to a mile below ground, but that's only in those very specific scenarios where they have enough oxygen to grow that deeply into the soil. So soil health equals tree health. We can think of that the exact same way. So when we're talking about urban trees, especially in parking strips, we really want to be talking about soil rooting volume. It's a really critical factor, and we really want to maximize it. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to go over planting design, planting practices, and some post-planting care. And I've got some research on some mitigation options as well for when we don't get some of our planting practices right. And I probably have well over 3 hours of content, but I'll try to speed through it as fast as I can to push it all into 45 minutes. And don't worry, I'm a fast talker. We got this. So when we talk about root collar disorders, we have some main things that we look at. Limited soil volume, stem girdling roots, improper planting, and little to no mulch. So we'll dig into each of those a little bit better. So has anybody ever seen root collars that kind of look like this? And I get that you guys are muted, but I'm seeing some head nods. So on that right-hand side there, we've got this tree that's covered in twine. And when I kind of performed a little root collar excavation, it still had all the burlap around the roots. So that's packaging material for these trees, to be shipped from a nursery to your house. That packaging material needs to come off of the tree. And then on the left-hand side, you can kind of see that more of that same planted material. At least on this one, they removed that orange twine, which is kind of nice. But still, we really missed the mark with planting on this one. And these were actually taken from the same landscape. Another really big one is buried root collars. So if you imagine a child's drawing of a tree where the trunk comes down and it starts to taper really rapidly and it meets the ground, you're going to have that zone of rapid taper, and that's the root collar. So that's an area that needs to be above ground. So that's that magical zone where stem tissue becomes root tissue, or maybe it's the other way around. Root tissue becomes stem tissue. And it's vitally important that we can see that root flare. So we've got a tree on the left that has been buried pretty significantly. So that's actually been buried about 3 feet, and that's just with excessive mulch application. And then you can see a tree on the right that's actually got a pretty good root flare. And you can see some of those roots coming out like spokes on a wheel. Now, the tree on the right does have some other issues, like it doesn't have any mulch, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the big hazards with buried root collars is, so here's a little case study for it. So this lace leaf Japanese maple was declining. The client didn't know why. Another arborist had come out and said it was verticillium wilt. And I have a whole soapbox on how it's never verticillium wilt. And through a little bit of digging, and you can see my hoary on the right side there, we found that the root flare was buried, and it was buried to the graft line. And in that graft line, typically trees do swell near that graft line. So whoever planted it got to the graft line and like, all right, cool, this is the root collar. But now, 25, 30 years later, having all of that soil right on the base of the tree led to armillaria root rots. So on the right side there, just as I was like brushing soil off with my hand, I was literally pulling off that bark, and none of that was functional. It was totally decayed. So unfortunately, this tree was a little too far gone for us to actually do anything about it. And when I took this picture, it was in June, and then by July it was dead. And the tree just didn't quite realize that it didn't have any more essentially roots. So that's one of the big dangers with buried root collars. So the other big danger with buried root collars is we can get this condition called stem girdling roots. So these are roots that are at or above the root collar. So root on root action is fine, but root on stem action is not cool. So root biology and stem biology is so different that when it curves around the trunk of the tree, it'll actually choke that tree, and it won't be able to graft together. So we're going to restrict our water and nutrient flow from the roots up to the trunk and vice versa. And we're going to lose that anchoring system, and it's eventually either going to lead to the tree toppling over or the tree death. And this is whenever anybody says, "Oh, I think my maple has verticillium wilt," 95% of the time it's stem girdling roots. I can almost guarantee it. So here's an example of what a stem girdling root would look like. So you can see there's 2 girdling roots on there, and it's not quite girdling the trunk yet, but eventually it will. And this tree was, about, 4 inches in diameter, and that pot size, that's a perfect 5-gallon pot size. So one of the things that we really like about containerized plants is, from the nursery industry, you can, containerize these plants and capture 100% of the tree's root systems. And then when we ship them out to our clients, and they plant them in their yards, they're planting 100% of the root system. Whereas with, bald and burlap trees or with bare root trees, we're oftentimes cutting up to 80% of the root systems off. So we get really good planting success with containerized trees, But with those, really smooth containers, the roots, they don't really have a sense of direction, and they're going to grow out and they're going to hit the side of the container and then turn, and then hit the side of the container and turn, and hit the side of the container and turn, hit the side of the container and turn, until they're eventually circling around that. So have you guys ever found a container or a root bound plant that's been in a container for too long? Yeah, it's pretty common, and almost all trees have been in a smaller container at some point. So this is a very common thing to see. And later on, we'll get into some of the planting practices of how we want to address that. And this is another big one that we see often. So this tree, I took this picture probably 10 years ago. This tree broke in really, really low winds. It was maybe 5 to 10 miles an hour. It was a relatively calm day. And when we went to investigate it, it looks like it doesn't have any roots, but it's because those roots were circling around the trunk. It caused enough decay there that it just toppled over. It didn't have any roots that were functionally anchoring it into the soil. So we'll talk a little bit more about planting design and planting practices. So ideally, you want to plant trees with shared root zones rather than individual root zones. So we did a cool little study at our lab in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we took, I believe these were oaks. I can't remember what the tree species was, but we took an equal amount of oaks and we planted some in shared root beds and others in individual planter beds. So the shared root beds are on the left, the individuals are on the right. So what we found with the trees in the shared root beds was the diameter at breast height increased significantly. The canopy volume and density increased significantly. The SPAD readings, so essentially how green the leaves are, which is a pretty good analogy for how much it's photosynthesizing. So greener leaves means more chlorophyll and more photosynthesis. And we're all significantly higher. And the trees that were in individual plant beds, they just kind of looked like they sucked a little bit. They just seemed like they were struggling. And this was a relatively short study. It took us about 3 years to do it. And these trees are actually still in the collection at the Arboretum, and they're significantly larger now. And the ones with shared root systems look banging. They're so nice. And the ones that are still in individual planting holes, they're still just kind of lackluster. They're not growing nearly as much as they should be. And now about 10 years on in the study, the ones in the shared root systems are probably twice as big as the ones in individual containers. And there's been no irrigation and no fertilization to any of these trees since planting. So one of the big reasons for that is grass is a major competitor for tree roots. So if you think about a really traditional grassland ecosystem, it's going to be very bacterial focused. You'll kind of get some of those kind of sewagey smells in it. And grass will outcompete tree roots in a lot of ways. So when we compare it to mulch, and this was a study done by Gary Watson at the Morton Arboretum, back in the 80s or something, he was able to prove that tree roots growing under grass had significantly less fine root hair production than tree roots growing in mulch. One of the other things that leads to is this is something that Ryan and I like to call mower blight. So it's just from banging your lawnmower or weed whacker, against the trunk of that tree in an effort to manage the turf. And so I do come at this from an arborist perspective. I'm team death to all turf. Can't stand the stuff. But I'm much more arboreally focused. So grass has no business in tree plantings. So the other, kind of big thing is compacted soil, and this is something that mulch helps a lot with. So when we have, really nice, humusy, rich, uncompacted soil, you can almost stick your hands into it and really feel it. But with compacted soil, it's, think of it like a sponge, it's really hard and air and moisture can't get, really penetrate into it. So, what do we do about it? It's mulch. Mulch is one of the best things that we can do for tree roots. So not only does it add organic matter, it reduces evaporation from water out of the soil. So that's just the solar loss of water coming out of that soil. It's going to improve structure and distribution of water going through that soil. And, to some extent, it's going to suppress or eliminate some competition. So not as much grass or, weeds are going to come up in your mulch beds. So arborists really like wood chips. That's our, favored mulch. But most mulch is going to be good for you. So as long as it has some kind of like composted element and it's not like rubber. So this was, and we did this study in our San Antonio office just so we can get really nice swingy results with it. But you guys can absolutely do this at your house tomorrow and get really good results. So all that you need is a barbecue thermometer so that you can stick it into the soil. So our thermometer, when we took it out, it read 105 degrees. And then when we left it in the sun for about 10 minutes, it read 130 degrees. And then we stuck our thermometer into bare soil and we were reading about 102 degrees. And we stuck it into soil about 6 inches deep. And then grass, we did see some cooling benefit with grass, and that's 92 degrees. And then with just 3 inches of mulch, that's, about a 24, 25 degree change, 76 degrees Fahrenheit. So imagine you're working in your garden right now. How much longer do you think you can stay working in your garden at 76 degrees versus 105 degrees? It's probably a lot longer, right? I know I would rather work in 76 degrees. So that's one of the main benefits of mulch is like, not only do we get all this great, structural soil stuff and this, really awesome nutrient recycling, but we get this cooling benefit. It's a blanket. And we see similar results in the winter as well, in that our winter soils don't fluctuate as much with extreme cold. I thought I had a different slide coming up next. So not all mulch is good mulch, and this is, again, really broad strokes. Stone is typically not a great mulch unless we're kind of going for a very xeric, sort of gardening where we want really sharply drained soils. Like I'm building a crevice garden at my house and it's exclusively stone. But that's because these high alpine plants that I'm planting need that really sharply drained soil and kind of swingy temperatures. And then like the rubber mulch. We can do better. Anywhere else, we just call that littering. So let's get some wood chips on there. So when we're talking about planting and planting seasons, we want to plant trees when we have water present. And in our area, in pretty much all of Oregon, our soil really doesn't freeze. Maybe in some parts of like way eastern Oregon or in like central Oregon, but for the most part, our roots are growing throughout the entire winter. So if we're planting in the summer, it's as long as we're giving it ample, water and and a little bit of care, we'll have pretty good success. But if you really want the best results, we want to be planting in kind of these shoulder months where we don't have to water. So this is a chart of how much water we get versus how hot it gets. So the lines are so the line parts of the graph are are the average temperature. And then the bar parts of the graph is our average water. And it's pretty self-explanatory, right? In the summer, we don't get a whole lot of water, but it gets real hot. In the winter, it gets real cold, but we get a lot more water. So let's try to maximize that with our tree planting and plants, in those, September through, I'm going to call it March, maybe April into May, are all great times to plant trees. And we don't have to water them. We just have to stick the things in the ground and let them do the work. So when we talk about proper planting, we want the green side up. And we want the root flare exposed. So this is straight from our A300 standards for how to plant a tree. So we want a really wide hole that we dig, that we backfill with native soil, and try to blur that lines between our steep and sharp shovel cuts and that backfilled soil. So staking is, optional. If you don't have a really robust root system, you might have to stake the tree, but, we typically want to stake the trees relatively loosely, and eventually the tree needs to, hold itself aloft. We can't be on training wheels for too long. And typically it's only going to be through its initial growing season. So like if we plant a tree, if we planted a tree a month ago in April, I would be taking that stake off in probably June. And this is showing a kind of a loose fitting trunk wrap. That's only when you expect some kind of root or trunk injury, which most of the time is not going to be in any of our plantings. And we want to mulch trees right after we plant them because we get all of that great benefit from mulch. We'll kind of go into some of this research about maximizing root volume at planting and some of the studies that we did on that. But are there any questions on some of those previous slides before I get too far into that? Okay, awesome. Well, we'll keep plugging away then. So our goal with planting trees is to prevent circling roots and to promote root growth away from the trunk and to promote growth outside of the planting hole into the surrounding soils, into our native soils. So we have a lot of issues that could be hidden in a ball and burlap tree or a containerized tree. So like this one, that has a buried root collar, which I don't think I've ever gotten a tree from a nursery that doesn't have a buried root collar. So we always need to go on an exploratory mission to find the root collar. And in this one, we found a stem girdling root on it. So we cut that one off at planting. And then, girdling and circling roots are super common in containers. Is this, is this kind of what a containerized tree typically looks like in your guys' experience? I would say so. Yeah, I've never found a containerized tree that has a perfect root system. And almost every one of these plants was in a smaller container at some point during its production. So even though this is now in a 20-gallon container, you can see that perfect, 2.5-gallon container that was in before. And it's really difficult for those roots to expand out from there. And the roots don't really have a sense of direction. They don't. Once you put them into a bigger container or into the native soil, they're not going to like unfold these roots and be like, oh, thank goodness. They're always going to stay in that same position, and the trunk is going to grow in diameter and the roots are going to grow in diameter. And eventually we'll see some of those other root collar disorders that, we talked about earlier. So what can be done at planting? So this is, the study parts. This again was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you can see that really classic red clay that those soils look like there. So we did two root ball disturbance techniques and one control. So we used autumn blaze maple and willow oak. and we used 15-gallon container stock. So one of our disturbance options was root washing, the other was mechanical disturbance, and our control, all that we did was expose the root flare and stick it in the ground. So with the root ball washing, we essentially made bare roots out of these trees. So we took that containerized tree and washed all of the soil off of it and teased out some of those roots or cut some of those circling roots. And then with the mechanical disturbance, and I wish I would have kept the video of Eldon, like he's literally axe murdering these trees. So he's cutting off about 80% of the root system, and he's just hacking at it. He's going nuts on them. So this is what the tree looked like before, in progress. So you can see in the middle there on that one, we have a really big girdling root from that previous container size. And that's the one that we removed. And this is what they would look like after we were done. So that's the before and that's the after. So we're cutting off 80 to 90% of these root systems in an effort to get, these perfect roots growing outwards. So pretty extreme, right? Oh, sorry. Let me go back a little bit. So when we planted them, we stuck them in the ground, with the root flare above ground, and then backfilled with our native soil and made a soil slurry. So with that soil slurry with a lot of water, that helps migrate some of those fines from the soil underneath, and helps them pack really tightly against those roots. And then that's one of our control trees going in the ground. So those were a lot easier to plant. We just took them out of the container and just rolled them into a hole and said good luck. So in our first season, so we planted these trees in March, I believe, and then we looked at these in September. So in their first season, all of our disturbed trees looked a little worse. So this is just a rating system from 0 to 10. So 10 is the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. 0 is it's dead. So on average, our disturbed and washed trees, which I'll just be referring to them as disturbed, looked significantly worse than our control trees. And the diameter growth in our disturbed groups was significantly reduced than our control groups. So disturbing the trees made them look worse, grow less, but none of the trees from any of our groups died. So 2 years into the study, we took an air excavation tool called an air spade, and we dug trenches. One right at the edge of the planting hole, and another, I want to say it's like 2 feet away. And we're trying to count how many roots are outside of the original planting hole. So this is us doing that. And by the second season, so this is year 2 now, there is no difference in diameter growth, and there's no difference in condition. So all the condition is about the same, and all of the disturbed groups caught up to the diameter growth, to the controlled group. So after 2 years, there's no difference in growth, no difference in the condition ratings and appearance, and all the trees are still alive. And the root counts in our control groups were significantly better. So in those air spaded trenches, with the maple, we had significantly more roots outside of the original hole. The oaks, we had the same average number of roots, but they were larger in diameter. So about 5 years into the study, we cut off the tops of the trees and dug them up with a big tree spade, and we washed all the soil off. And then we took a dye of the original containers, spray painted them, and then cut off all the roots. And then we made perpendicular cuts to try to measure the surface area of any circling roots. So with those perpendicular cuts, we pulled that little chunk out and we measured that surface area. So in our control groups, we had significantly more circling and girdling surface area than in the disturbed or washed groups. And you can see in the disturbed and washed groups, there's virtually none. And with our control groups, there's a lot. So here's one of our control maples, and you can see that like perfect planting container right there in the middle of that nest of roots. And then here's what one of our disturbed maples looks like. So pretty cool improvement on that. So here's the oaks, and you can see that really big girdling roots, and then our disturbed oak, and that root system looks so much better. So, and you know, I might have been leading the witness a little bit here, but which one of these looks better to you? You know, which one is going to be a tree that's going to be successful in our landscapes, in our urban forests, in our parks for the next 50 years for our kids and our kids' grandkids to enjoy? I think it's the disturbed group for sure. And thank you guys for agreeing with me. So when we're planting for ideal root development, we only have one chance to get this right. We're only planting trees once, so this is the time. So we want to find the root collar and put that where? Above ground. And we want to remove any circling or girdling roots. And the longer that I've planted trees, the more I realize how more aggressive I could have been early in my career. So go nuts with it. You almost can't do too much. If you did too much, you'd be cutting off the root flare. That's too much. So we'll take one step back from that. And we want to, any of the roots that are flexible enough, we can splay those out and kind of stake them, down with a little bit of mud. And we want to create a slurry for our soil backfill. That reduces the transition between the whole and the native soil. It removes a lot of those really big air pockets that roots can't grow into, and allows more root to soil contact. And just know when we do that significant disturbing in our trees, the condition and growth are going to look, are going to be reduced, but it's a temporary thing. We're setting these trees up for the future. So what can we do with trees that aren't well established? So if you planted a tree and didn't do all this, one thing we can do is homogenize the transition zone from the ball or container into our native soil. And we can use what's called an air spade, and it's an air excavation device. And these work really well, and a lot of arborists in Portland and the world are starting to use these a lot, and they work great. And I've cut a lot of girdling roots with them, but it's way easier to deal with a girdling root when it's this size, when it's pinky size, than when it's 5 inches in diameter. So how am I doing on time? Should I keep going? Yep. Okay. All right. So, the most common causes for declines in mature tree is an accumulation of stressors. So it's going to be, a grade change. Maybe that happened like 20 years ago. It's going to be poor drainage, and that might be due to compaction. And, it's going to be impermeable surfaces like concretes. And then, changes in water availability. And some of the plant factors that go into that is, the wrong plant for the site. And I'll get on my climate change soapbox here, especially for our urban plantings. Native isn't always best. So if you look into your backyard or in your in the parking strip by by the road, is that a native site? And the answer in most cases, especially within Portland, within the growth boundaries, is no. And some of our native trees aren't the best adapted for those conditions. So we do want to plant trees that are really tough and will grow in those soil conditions that we have present. So we're not going to plant a cactus in a wetland area. it's clearly not going to do well. We're going to, try to select something that does really well in wet soils. And, vice versa. When we have really, really, really dry soils, we don't want to plant like a Katsura that's going to need a ton of water. We're going to want to plant, like, oh man, and now my mind's going blank. Like, a manzanita, something that has really low water demands and is evolved to have really seasonally dry soils. So what can be done for declining trees? We talked about this. It's best to address it before we start seeing really major decline. And we have a trademarked product, but most everybody does this, and we call it our root invigoration process, where we reduce compaction in the soil using that air excavation device, and we're using that to fracture the soil and stir in a lot of mulch, so that we're trying to recreate those really nice soil horizons, and add mulch and organic matter into the soil, and then we'll put some mulch on top, so that it's a really, really nice planting at the end. So I've got some success stories with it. So this was in 2007. We did a root invigoration on this, and we removed a lot of that grass. So you can see in that photo to the right, we probably expanded that tree ring by probably 30%. And the tree is doing so much better. And this was down in Texas. This one is in California, and I can't remember the tree species for this one, but it's right in front of this this corporate campus. It was in decline. It had like really bad scale issues. We did the root invigoration on it in the winter of 2017, and we went back and took a picture of it in 2020. And this thing was on death's door, and it looked significantly better. And all that we did was decompact the soil. So we made it a better place for tree roots to grow. So this is actually in front of Mr. Robert Bartlett's house, and this is his. He was thinking about removing this crepe myrtle, and a year later, it's blooming, it's super green, and all that we did was decompact the soil. So that's kind of the commercial part of it. And I lost my train of thought. We have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to know other ways of decompacting the soil. Can we sort of dig up the soil
Yes.
around the wider root area?
Thank you. And you just jogged my memory. That was the next point that I was going to make. So I didn't include these slides in this right now, but we recently completed a study where, and the study took place in a couple of different areas. It took place in Charlotte and at our lab in the UK, and then as well as in here on the West Coast in Cornelius, actually. Where we did different decompaction methods. So one of the dangers with just doing, with a shovel or with, like an auger bit is we're going to be really, really, messing up the roots that are growing in that soil. Even if it's not an ideal condition for the roots, we're going to be chopping up those, roots into little bits, and we really need all of those roots to be connected to the tree. So that's one of the big dangers with doing it, with, mechanical, cutting tools. So we did two treatments. One where we just took mulch and applied it at 2 to 6 inches depth, and it was arborist wood chips. So what comes out of the end of our chippers, and then the other control was doing our root invigoration process, and then we had a control group where it was just bare soil. And the study took place for 5 years, and it's ongoing still. And with the root invigoration, we found that we decompacted the soil really quickly, and we got all those benefits in the first year. It looked great. But with the mulch, in the first year, there was really no change. And then the second year, we started noticing some really, really good decompaction happening. And that's because as that mulch was breaking down, we were attracting microorganisms and even macroorganisms like moles and worms that were eating some of that decomposed mulch and pulling it down into the soil. And after 5 years, and actually, I think it was after 3 years, I would have to review the study. There was almost no difference between the root invigoration and the mulch trees. So if we really want to do it fast, we can use that air excavation tool to really decompact the soil. But if we want to do it slowly, just adding mulch. And I can attest to this because I've done this at my house. I haven't brought an air spade to my house, but all that I did, when I first moved in, is I established a bunch of beds and I put a crap load of wood chips on top. And even in the heat of summer, I still have really rich, moist soil. And I don't water any of my plants in the summer. So it's, if you don't want to pay us to do any of that, decompaction work or any other arborist to do that decompaction work, just adding mulch is one of the biggest things we can do. All right, well, so that's kind of the end of my presentation. So do we have any questions? And I see there's some stuff in the chat. So let me open that up and we'll see. All right. Can you fix a several-year-old tree that was planted with circling roots? So yes, you can. It's a little bit harder. So the main tool that we use for that is our air excavation tool. And we want to blast all the soil away from it, find that circling root and cut it. And if the root is too large, we might do it over a period of time. We won't do it all at once, but my experience with it is you can be super aggressive with it. Go nuts. It's always best to cut. Maybe not always best. Shouldn't speak in absolutes. It's typically best to go for it. Because I at least find that I'm not very good at digging in the soil, and I never come back to finish that cut. So I'd rather just do the cut all at once. Oh, Ryan, nice. You answered that question. Oh, that's a really good response. All right. Let's see. When would you recommend root pruning? When we have root growth. So typically I like to see root pruning happen between, and it depends on how, hot our September is, but between September and, probably till now. The only time I really stray away from root pruning is as the tree is really actively growing and flushing leaves out, because it's investing a lot of energy into producing new leaves. And one of the places that they store energy through the winter is in their roots. But if the tree is already on its way out and it's having issues with girdling roots, I would rather remove that girdling root than let it go another season for the perfect time. And then in the summer, when we have really steep water needs, it is another time where I wouldn't recommend doing a ton of changes to the root system. But if it's between life and death, I think we should cut the roots as long as we have appropriate aftercare. All right, so wood chips bought from unknown sites. Is there a worry about pests or chemicals in them? So typically not with pests. So wood chips are, so the wood chips that I would avoid are playground wood chips. So those are going to be treated and they don't break down. You can go to a website, and Ryan will drop the link in the chat. But it's chip drop, and I can't remember if it's .org or .com. I remember it's a dot something, and you can get on a list where arborists will dump wood chips for you for free. It's a great site. I really like it. the only issues I can think of with wood chips, which I think has been disproven, is there are some trees that are alleliopathic, meaning they produce their own herbicides essentially. So like if you have like supposedly walnut wood chips might suppress some root growth, but once they start breaking down, there's negligible loss in trees. I think that's been pushed to it's a little exaggerated. All right, how much area beneath the tree should be grass free? All of it. So as much as I can get. If you really value your lawn, and that's fine. If we can go to the drip line of the tree, one of the things that we describe is the critical root zone. And the critical root zone can be defined as the diameter at breast height. So let's say we have a 10-inch diameter tree. I'm doing this just so it's easy math. And we want 3 to 5 or 3, maybe up to 10 times if you're really cool. But 3 to 5 times in feet. 3 to 5 times the diameter. So that would be 30 inches to 50 inches away. For a 10-inch diameter tree, and that would be really awesome. But if you're unwilling to part with that much, give me a foot, or give me an oblong shape. Like go nuts on one side where you don't necessarily need it, and a little closer on the other side. So there's a lot of really good options. So how deep do we need to go to remove grass that's already established beneath the tree? So there's some really good, kind of like permaculture style ways of removing grass. And that would be, solarizing it or putting some cardboard down and then putting some mulch down on top of it. It kills grass really well. The other way you can go about it is using a like a very short-lived herbicide. Like you could do vinegar to just burn the grass down, and then putting mulch on top of that. If it's like a sod area, you could cut the turf up with a turf cutting tool. But if it's already kind of uneven with tree roots, you might damage the roots. So I'd be careful doing that. All right, the next question. Are there any plants that can be planted around trees without competing as much as grass? Yes. Imagine a forest. That's, kind of what we're going for. So typically anything that does prefer to have a more fungal-based ecosystem. So like ferns are good, salal, perennials, there's a lot of stuff that can grow through mulch. And not compete as much as grass will. So the main thing with grass is it's a total different soil ecosystem. Nice, great link, Ryan. So my.getchipdrop.com/map. It's awesome. Great question. No concerns about EAB and wood chips from unknown sources? No, because one of the ways that we kill EAB is by cutting the wood into little pieces. So as long as their chipper is reasonably sharp and reasonably well tuned, and you're getting below, and I can't remember the exact number, but it'll look like perfect little wood chips. You will be cutting up all of those larvae, and then as the mulch heats up, you're going to be killing that larvae. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. That being said, there is a quarantine for ashes in in that area of Washington County, outside of Forest Grove. So we cannot transport any ash wood or any wood chips outside of that area. So you're unlikely to get EAB through wood chips. Should we aerate soil with something other than an air spade? Can we use a different tool? Just mulch. Just lay down some mulch. You don't necessarily always have to use the air tool. So is caliper the same as diameter? Yes. So caliper is a tool to measure diameter. So a caliper goes on either side, and it'll give you that measurement between there. All right, and I believe that's the end of the questions in chat. But if anybody has any questions they want to, speak out loud, or comments, funny anecdotes, jokes.
I'm not hearing anything, but definitely want to give people another minute or two to answer or ask any questions that are still lingering.
Is it a concern that, J rooting, where when you put it in the soil and you bend the root?
Yes, that definitely is an issue. So I won't name the nursery. I almost did, but so I just got some calistamen from a nursery, and they were like just jammed into this pot, and the root came down and all the way back up to the top of the tree, and it was one of the worst root systems I've ever seen, and it was really disappointing because I spent maybe a little bit too much money on those plants, and they died this winter because I didn't plant them out soon enough before all the cold weather. Anyways, you're not here to hear me lament about some calistamen that I bought. Yeah, J roots can be an issue. And the biggest issue with the J rooting is that we're not going to have the roots on the other side of the tree. So actually, at my mom's house, we're dealing with that with a tree in her right by our front entry. There's no roots on one side of the tree. So every winter I have to stake it to make sure it doesn't fall over. And I'm keeping it really small because I don't really want to replant another tree there. But yeah, J roots are a big issue.
Thanks for that question. I don't know if you see in the comments, but people are very appreciative. Thank you both, Logan and Ryan. Really appreciate the time tonight. Super informative. I think you're setting a lot of people up for success. So thanks for working this into your schedule. And anybody can also reach out to Bartlett for any follow-up questions after this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, so my email is lcollier, COLLIER @bartlett.com. And that's the same for Ryan's email. It's first initial and last name. So if you guys have any questions, shoot us an email. We would love to talk trees.
And we would love to talk to you some more. So, well, thank you both. And thanks everybody for joining this evening. We really appreciate it. You can see there the webinar is going to be posted. So if you want to watch any of it again, it'll be up probably in a couple of days. So check the website. So with that, thanks everybody. Hope you have a wonderful evening. And yeah, you take care and take care of those trees. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.